Hi there, welcome to the Blue Flame Project. My name is Clint Adams and I'm the author of this book, Lighting the Blue Flame. When I first started even thinking about writing the book, it was originally a school program which was based on really bad information I was getting and bad statistics that was showing how younger people, were really struggling with some of their mental health issues, which included, trauma, obviously, but that being a cause, and then the knock-on effects of that is stuff like alcoholism, kids on suicide watch and all that kind of stuff. And for me, um, I kind of it really bothered me that was happening. And then there were really high profile cases of kids who have been bullied, and then taken their own lives as a result of that bullying, whether that's cyberbullying, bullying in the school environment, all that sort of stuff. So the book was basically come about from me trying to run some school programs with different schools when I worked in Colac down in Victoria. A lot of the principals were kind of keen on looking at the program, looking at ways we could develop resilience in children at school to kind of avoid, them having issues later on in life. We can't always avoid the trauma. Often, the parents of kids who've had trauma in their lives are partly the cause or the whole cause of that. And so there is an element that, schools can do a little bit more to enhance that resilience in children. And that's kind of how it all started, was me trying to look at ways of developing that resilience, dealing with things in a different way, and kind of helping the whole class. If you do it as classes, classrooms, that is, ideally you want a whole group. Usually in primary school in Australia, you tend to have the same kids go through until at least high school. So they do develop, friendships, relationships with other kids in the classroom. And part of my role as a HR professional for many years, I could kind of see the pattern of, when we get to a workplace, we kind of develop the team to work better together, to interact better together, to have those good relationships and be able to thrash out stuff when they don't agree. But we don't tend to do that with kids. So big elements of the book is specifically to help schools deal with that. I use something called the dialogue model, which I've talked about in other podcasts and stuff like that, which comes from a book of Crucial Conversations and how to have them. The tool's really helpful, gives people insight on how they're feeling while they're having conversations, or how they're feeling when they're choosing not to be involved in a conversation because there's fear of their safety, and elements of that. And so the book's written in a way around a story of a young person who decides to take his own life, who wants to send a message out to the kids that have been the bullies, but also the kids that have stood by and kind of laughed and egged them on, and also the kids that, have kind of been too scared to say anything, do anything, so they just literally say, hey, it's not me being picked on, not me being bullied, so they disengage and don't get involved. And there's also sending a clear message to teachers who, it's kind of difficult. You see it now quite a bit, and you hear the feedback after there has been a suicide at the school, that the school kind of goes into oh crap mode, and they just want to be quite defensive about it. Obviously they don't want to admit guilt, they don't want to admit that there's a problem in the school, they don't want to bring bad press to themselves. So all of those elements have major issues, which we want to try to avoid ultimately. If we can avoid the suicide, happy days. If we can avoid the bullying that potentially leads to the suicide, happy days. And so, if we think of root cause analysis, we can kind of go, why did this person take their own life? Because the why is they were bullied, and you go, why are they being bullied? So the 5 whys is a kind of manufacturing tool to look at root cause analysis. When something goes wrong, they keep asking why until they get to a root cause. And so ultimately, I did a similar thing for the book in terms of looking at a person that takes their own life. You go, why? Okay, they were bullied by this person. Why is that person bullying this kid? Okay, and the more you go down the line, the more you can kind of get to a point where you go, that kid was also bullied, or that kid's been treated badly by their parents, so they're angry. They're now taking it out on someone else. They're getting laughs about it, and it's boosting their ego, they're making them feel better about themselves at the expense of this other person. So understanding how that whole pattern of stuff kind of ends up with this person taking their own life helps you kind of understand what you need to address at a school level as a parent if your kid is a bully, and kind of, taking some of those risk factors out of the way. And so the book's written in that way. It's a story of this kid that decides he wants to send a message to these kids. He wants to see a change that it doesn't happen to other kids in the future. And so part of the story involves me coming in as a consultant, say, to help the school deal with some of those root causes, and in a much more positive way. The book also has a lot of QR codes through it. I use it specifically for hyperlinking to various things. Some are like interactions between teenagers in the book or characters in the book, how they would interact as teenagers. It's kind of a bit more interactive, a bit more fun, but there's also some very significant references that those QR codes take you to, like the dialogue model, which is in the book I mentioned. And so the book has its own soundtracks. There's a lot of, people kind of resonate with music and identify with kind of having fun and all that sort of stuff. And so the key part of the book for me was trying to look at solutions, try to make it, I guess people can relate to it. Obviously, there's a component of grief in the book. I address that in a way, reference some really good books that helps people with grieving, not just with suicide, but with also, deaths in the family. We're all human beings. We're all going to go through some tough times. And so the book's really written to try and help as many people as I can. Part of the book focuses on that grief at parent level. Part of the book focuses on how they can, use the group classroom environment to enhance the relationships, to enhance the way kids interact. Sometimes, if you think of a bullying perspective, the reason some of those kids, again, root cause analysis, why are those kids watching this stuff? They don't like what's happening to the main character, but they do nothing. Why? Because they're scared. Why are they scared? Because they don't want to get picked on. They don't want to be the other kid who's getting bullied. And then you essentially can go through and do the 5 whys for each of those different groups, right? And ultimately you come up with different solutions. I'm not saying that everything in my book is the perfect solution to doing any of this stuff, but I'd like to have people thinking in that way and really, I guess, challenging the status quo on how we deal with mental health more as a community than just, oh, you've fallen off the perch, you come to me. So I have been a counsellor in the past, and dealt with people with PTSD, done it for Victoria Police. And so, I do understand that there's a place for counselling, there's a place for therapy, but ultimately if we can avoid a lot of those people getting to the point where they are less resilient and they do fall off, and they're struggling, if we can avoid that, again, proactive measures make it a lot easier than coming up with a cure, right? We want to try and prevent as much as we can. We're never going to get it right 100%, but I do see that there's certainly patterns, and the way we're doing stuff at the moment is very much the one-on-one stuff is much more focused on in our mental health space. And I do think that there's a lot more work we could do if we were helping schools, helping, the support services that are in different communities who may not be as well funded, not the big ones, having real psychiatrists and psychologists there, but people who've kind of just done a small course and stuff. Part of the book is about helping with the education of those people and enhancing what we're doing now. Every bit that enhances what we're not doing is going to be better for us overall as a community. And so, yeah, look, if you do want to check it out on Amazon, Lighting the Blue Flame, Clint Adams, my name. I'd be interested to hear any comments, or you can read quite a few chapters for free on the Amazon. If you go into Amazon, it says there, you can kind of have a look at the books. I think it's about 10 or 12 chapters for free. Gives you a very, very good idea of kind of the content that I'm heading with. And if you do like it, please feel free to send it around and promote it. Thank you for your time.